show a tool that I have been writing to make my life easier to create and define tile sets using LDtk editor. What you see on my screen right now is you see the same pattern on the top and the bottom sides of it, but what we have here, if we highlight just the current layer in here, you're gonna see that the first layer on top, that's tiles, it has manually drew tiles. So here I have been using a tile set in a sprite file, this one in here that you can see, and I picked the images from here and I drew them manually, sprite by sprite. And then with my script, with my tool, I could actually run a command and enable the editor to actually or enable this tile set map exactly actually to have the right rules and then draw your own patterns based on that. So if you look at the rules here, you're going to see that we have a few dozens of rules, and they have some of their own complexity. They have the cork order, and basically this is how at the end LDTK uses to actually define these rules. So this is actually the final state, but in order to show this a bit more, I have to go a little bit back to the beginning so you understand what I mean. So let's close this file and let's create a brand new project called my project. So I just discovered LDTK editor uh, about 1 week ago. LDTK is a new tool in the market compared to the existing tools that enables game developers to design and define their own tile sets for their 2D games, and it only supports orthogonal maps at the moment. And basically, the way how it works is that when you create a new project, you have to add a tile set where you add a file that contains the sprites. And once you have this, you are able to create a layer. It provides a couple of different types of layers, but the one we are focusing on right now is the tiles, which is the manual one. So we give a name, we choose a default tile set, and there are more options, but let's stay for now. And here, by having this, you can draw manually stuff like this. So you can, for example, or maybe increase this one and then draw your own tile set. So by using this tool, you can manually do whatever you need to build your levels, your platforms, your top-down games, and so on. And it's a tool that has been gaining some light spots because it offers a nicer and easier UI compared to existing toolings like TileED or the Unity Tile Editor or Unity 2D Extras and so on. So this is a very handy tool. It offers some very useful features, and the UI is quite helpful and friendly. So this is really a big point in favor of LDTK. And once I knew it and started using it, I really liked the whole thing, how it works. And one thing that it works quite well in here is that, let's say I want to delete all of this, and then let's just copy this again, and instead of actually drawing it manually, I want to actually define some rules. So instead of having to drop one by one image, I can just draw whatever I want and can smartly find out which are the right tiles, right? So in order to achieve that, one can come in here, create an integer grid. And the integer grid is also assigned to a tile set for an auto layout or auto layer approach. And we just keep everything as they are. I'm also using the 16 pixel size tiles by default. So let's close it in here. And then the way LDTK works is that you have rules, and in these rules, basically you are able to create multiple groups if you need. And in these groups, what you're going to do is you're going to choose the tiles you want, and you're going to set some rules. So in this case, for example, what I want is to say that this corner has no tile on the top and on the left side, and I can keep doing that, for example, for the top edge. So I can choose, for example, I can even choose one more than one, right? Because then, for example, in here, I have three different tiles or three different sprites for the same position. So I can choose something like this, and the application is going to be able to actually randomize and choose one of them. And this is also a very helpful tool. And we can say, well, this one doesn't have anything on the top edge. And the cool thing about LDtk compared to other tools that do the same, but here you have not only a nice UI, but you have some nice little features that make it really shine. So, for example, for the edge on the top, I could, for example, say that, well, I also want to have the same rule for the bottom edge. So I can say, please do a Y mirror for me, right? And for the corners, I can actually do both axes. I can have a X mirror, I can have a Y mirror as well. So this is quite helpful. And now, for example, we can actually also add the side edges, for example, these ones, and then say that there's nothing on the left side. And for this one, I say mirror on the X axis. And finally, I can add one more tile or one more rule for the filling. And I can also follow the same idea. I can have these four types of tiles, and I can say this one could have pretty much anything around it. So by having these four rules in here, I'm now able to, for example, draw stuff. There's something wrong in here. What's wrong? Um, yeah, we should move the corner to the top. So basically, by setting up these rules, one can actually make some pretty nice stuff, um, such as these ones. You can actually do uh, go nuts and actually create other rules and then define them as you want. So this works pretty well. The problem I have with this, and I think it's not sufficient for me, is that even though it's still very handy in comparison to the existing tools, I have a serious problem to actually keep doing the same things over and over and over again. I really hate doing the repetitive work, especially when it doesn't bring any value. And the problem here is that if I have any more complex scenario, let's say with a platformer where I don't want to use mirroring because there are different shapes or different styles for the top and the bottom tiles, or if I want to support things like, a more complex setup like this, where you have, this funny cross here in the between. So for any situation that goes beyond this, we can imagine that you would have here dozens of different rules and different sprites. So it could be, 50 or maybe, even over than that of rules. And the problem is not only the amount of the rules, but also the positioning of them, in which order they come, and how do we set up the patterns here correctly, and so on. So we can find that out once, but I don't want to do this again and again and again. I don't want to repeat the same tough work of finding the right setup. Even though there might be variations from one project to the other, it's mostly following the same pattern. So if you go to this my image in here, basically these sprites have all possible variations of sprites in a 2D orthogonal tile set. So here we have, for example, filled shapes like rectangles. We have holes in the middle. We have an island. We have, little stubs. We have some corners. We have thin sticks and things like this. And then we have some variations, for example, like this T shape with all four angles of rotation. We have some P shape corners as well in both orientations. So here you can see we have already a plethora of variations, and the way how they combine and how we set the patterns all of this together take a while, take a work, and I don't want to keep doing the same over and over again. If I have, let's say, a game with 5 levels, each one of them with 10 rooms, I easily can end up with 50 rooms. So that means about 50 layouts, I don't know, 2 or 3 times bigger than the one you see on here. So I don't want to end up doing that. So that's why I wrote this script. So if you look at the GitHub repository where I placed it, it has some instructions. Actually, it still miss a couple of things in terms of instructions and better polishing, but well, this is still very initial stage. I just spent a day on it since I created. So the point in here is I want to ensure that I don't repeat work, but I also want to ensure that I keep having some level of freedom. I don't want to be forced to always draw in the same way because I might have situations where I have more variations in the corners, on the in the top, uh, sprites, or in other situations where I have more variations in the filling tiles and so on. So I don't want to be always drawing, let's say, in one single layout like this. I want to have the freedom to do it the way that I feel the better. And once I bring that image in here, I want to make my life easier to actually set up it, the way I feel good. So this is how I've done it, right? Let's look at it again in here. And well, we can, for example, keep this one in there, and let's just delete what we have. And in the manual work in here, we're gonna do like this. I'm gonna draw the way I want it to look like manually, right? So for example, we have this square in here, and well, let's keep it as is right now. Let's save it. And what my script gonna do now is it's gonna follow whatever I have in this layer and then create the rules based on them. So it's not so difficult. It has a little bit of simplification and optimization in that, but it's not rocket science. So let's clear this up, and this is how the command works. Um, the first argument, well, let's go back to the web page and you're going to see here. So you can actually write in your command line just this command and try it in there. So let's say this. And even though it's still not that nice, you can already see here that you have plenty of options. So the first option is the optional argument no simplified. This is a way to actually disable the optimization for the patterns, but I can talk about it later on. It's not relevant right now. The second argument is the path file, um, which looks like this, right? So let's run this code. Let's go back to this command. And the path is this. So my project.ldtk. The second argument is the name of the source level, the level that I'm using to create my pattern, how it should look like. And this level name you can see up in here, level 0. So level 0. The next one is going to be the layer name of the same layer. So we are talking about this name in here, tiles. And the third one going to be the destination, the output layer, the integer grid layer that it should be created or updated. So in this case, I have already this int grid, which is empty right now, and it has some rules. So let's keep it as it for the sake of for the demoing. But it's not necessary. You can just delete it. Doesn't matter. So let's go there and write down int grid. And finally, we have to define the tile size. And the tile size basically is what you have here, 16 pixels, right? So 16. By running this command, now we have to close and reopen. It replaced the existing int grid with a new one. And the new one, you can see it already has a little bit, a few differences comparing to before. So these rules were built based on these tiles. And now that I have this, so I can actually do dry some stuff or draw some stuff, right? So like this or something like this. I can keep doing that. So for example, I can draw a box like this with thin sticks. So let's keep doing. And here I want to show something a little bit special that you're gonna see in a second. So let's draw. And here we have a T shape. So that means this one. And well, the same T shape in other rotation. And you're gonna see an effect in here that we're gonna see soon. So let's run the same command again. Let's close it, open it again. And here, first effect that I want to show here is you can see that there's nothing showing, even though we did draw a box in here. And that's because there's still a little, it's not really a bug, but actually when I generate this layer, it doesn't update the layout that it's defined the, for the existing tiles. It actually will update them, but it will update only when LDtk do a re-render. So it doesn't mean that it actually lose anything. It just means that the screen here is looking outdated. So there's a trick for that, while I don't find a solution for it. That is, you just click somewhere and Command Z or Control Z to undo that change, and it gets back to the previous state. And here you can see it looks quite funny, and that is because there's something funny about my case in here, is that when you look at this sprite in here, it feels like this is an empty spot, right? So the my script should actually consider this an empty spot and then actually find out the right pattern by setting this tile here as a thin stick with two edges on the same sprite. But actually, for LDtk, these are not empty spaces, right? Because actually, if you paid attention to what I've done, I was actually copying them like this. And this image here, even though it's transparent, it's still not the same as this space in here, for example. Because this, I actually haven't placed anything in there, while this, I did place a transparent PNG image in there. So that's why I created something called empty tile. So empty tile means any image that you can use to represent empty space. And by doing that, you are completely aware on what is actually set to be empty. And then the script can use that to identify and then to enforce the pattern. So let's do this. And just to make my life easier, I will gonna do the same to the rest of it like it is in here. So if I want to create anything else, I will actually respect this empty space. So we're gonna have the same situation. Let's save it. Let's now run the command again. And once I run the command, I have this final argument here at the end that gives me a chance to actually tell which tiles are actually to be considered the empty tiles or the empty space tiles. And to do that, what I have to do is I just have to hover over my mouse cursor on the sprite that I want to know the ID and just look at this little box in here in the status bar. So it's going to show a number. You can see it there, 137. And then I just type that number in here, which is the ID for that. In case I have more than one, which is probably unnecessary, but in case it happens to be more than one, I just can keep typing them separate by comma. But I would say usually one would be sufficient. So let's run it, close it, let's go again. And well, let's do the trick to enforce LDtk to re-render. And now, boom, it works, right? So now I can actually do something like a little box, or let's say something like that. And here it works. Quite nice, right? And well, there are situations like this, right? Well, it's yeah, it's not working as expected because there should be a stub in here, right? But back to our uh, template layer, you can see that we actually don't have such a pattern here. So let's increase this file. Let's also fill this space in here with empty spots. And let's do something like this. Um, we're gonna have to fill this in again, and let's save it, and let's run the same command again. Close it, open it again, do the trick, and there we are. It works. So I can now make a cross like this. I can do like that, or I can even like draw some sort of OXO game. So it's gonna work. So that's all I wanted to show. Basically, by drawing anything in here, you are able to create a pattern based on that and then start using. And then, as you could see, it works for existing or for new ones. So for example, I can just um, delete this integer grid layout and run it again, and it's going to be there. And here we have already a couple of different rules, right? And what I can do now is I can go crazy and actually let's copy this file that's actually contained in the GitHub repository, source.ldtk. Let's copy it with another name, source test. And I want to show this file to you because this one I actually made a quite more complex situation. So you can see here that I have like some fractal looking patterns. And what I'm doing with this pattern is that with this template, I can achieve any format that I need in any orientation that's necessary. So by following this, I can draw, let's say, I don't know, grass tiles, and I can position them following this, and I will be sure that I'm covering all possible combinations, right? So we're gonna delete the existing ones in here because they have been used for testing purposes, and we're gonna save. And now we're gonna just double check if the empty tiles are still 137, that is. And the reason why it's the same, it's because I'm using the same image, right? So LDtk is gonna create them equally and will give the same numbers. But in your own tile sprites, it's definitely gonna look different than 137. Just keep that in mind. So we're gonna run this command keeping everything the same because the names match, right? Level 0 tiles. And I can create, my int grid. It doesn't matter, right? So I will give a new name now, which is source test. And once I create it, let's go back in there. We do have rules here. And then now I can actually start drawing a couple of things and going nuts because it's able to follow these patterns, right? If you really try hard, you're gonna find some special setups that are still not perfectly covered by this case in here. In this case, what you should do is come back to the tiles, draw those scenarios in here, regenerate, and they should start working. Or you still have the option to come to the rules and fix them manually yourself. I mean, of course, once you do it, you won't be able to come back and regenerate them again without losing your changes. So I would definitely suggest that you draw in the template and generate it again. And now I just want to show where it shines, because this is actually the example that shows why I don't want to keep doing this manually. If you scroll down here, yeah, we can actually do this. Let's collapse this group. So we have 4 groups. One of them is very small, which is the last one about filling tiles. But if you look at the others, this has 4, but let's go to the others. So the remaining tiles, that is, let's say, where everything else goes. We have a few dozens here. Can you see? And if you go to the top one about thin tiles, we also have a few dozens in there. So summing up all the rules here, we have something over 50 rules. And just imagine, it's not only about the amount of different sprites, you should consider also how to combine them in terms of multiple different variations of the same shapes. For example, for the filling in here, you can see we have a black box space, but we also have this one with 3 stripes on the horizontal, the other one with 4 stripes on the vertical, and these diagonal lines in here. And this was done with the intention to have 4 different variations in order to enable us to randomize, right? And the randomization is done by LDtk, but anyway, you have to set up it, right? It's some work to be done. So the good thing about these rules is that, yeah, they make your life easier to set up all of this, but it still works, and it's still work to be done. That's what I mean. And it's, as I said, it's not just about the quantity of different sprites and rules that should go, but also how you want to define the pattern rules. Because in some cases, let's say you want to make them a little bit more strict. In other cases, you want to make them a little bit more loose, right? So, and also it determines a little bit how you order stuff. So you can definitely use the swap and match option here to ensure that the pattern matching keeps going on the list. But in most cases, I would say this is probably a source of problems because it's harder to debug. So you have to decide also the order, the correct sequence that you're going to position these rules. So the combination of all this work is not easy. And if you have to do it in every game jam or every new layer or every new tile set that you have or every new game that you are working on, it's a lot of work. I don't want to have that repetitive work over and over again. So that's why I have written this script. Well, um, that's it. This is all I had to show. One thing that I would like to ask is if you know a better way of doing it or an existing solution that doesn't go through writing my own script for it, please write down in the comments. I'm going to be very happy to know that. This is actually my main purpose, is to actually get feedback so I can learn from others that are more experienced with LDtk than I am. Um, anyway, I thank you very much for staying with me all the way to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Please write down any comment that you may have. And I'm going to write in the description the link to my GitHub repository. This is an open source project with zero profit expected, so it's for free. You can just download it and use it. If you know a little bit of Python, it should be more than sufficient. You don't need to go into Python code to actually make it work. All you need is to install this script somewhere on your machine and run it like this. So you just basically run Python, which is Python 3, and then the commands, and you should be happy. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much. Till the next time.